pre-show quid pro quo. Camille, you get the first question. Go ahead.
Yes. My question for you is your autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
What would it be called?
Ooh, I've got so many autobiographies. Because I seem to have lived so many lives up in my 35 years. My life biography would probably be called "It Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time."
That's a good one. Yeah.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. But, yeah.
With an ellipses.
With an ellipsis, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that punctuation.
Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This? When the information drops in this episode, it's going to register on the Richter scale. A topic-based program where we talk about magic, the occult, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. So my name is Douglas, and I am joined by Camille, who has very graciously decided to talk about...
Soul flight.
Soul flight. So, most people know soul flight by a different name. It's either astral projection or astral travel. And what is it? And I find that this is a strange one because a lot of people who aren't familiar with the occult, they kind of have a small, or they've heard the term astral projection. Some people are like, oh, you're going to astral project your ass over there or something. That people of magical terms that the general public are familiar with, astral travel's kind of up there. So I got out my Watkins Dictionary of Magic, and it described astral travel thusly: conscious separation of the astral body from the physical body, resulting in an altered state of consciousness, and sometimes different qualities of perception. Astral travel is achieved by a variety of trance-inducing methods and is sometimes referred to by occultists as traveling in the spirit vision. Ooh, spirit vision. I like that. Interesting stuff. So the question is begged, what is the astral body? The double of the human body, usually regarded by occultists as the source of consciousness. Well, there's that. My definition is extremely vague. It's just, while in an altered state of consciousness, sitting or lying down, you go places that seem as real as real. So, this is what I want to concentrate on. Other forms of quote-unquote journeying will play a small role, but they might as well be, they could be separate episodes in the future. Things like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, scrying, that kind of thing. So we're going to try and hone in on the idea of soul flight or astral travel or astral projection. So everybody's favorite occultist, Henrik Cornelius Agrippa, talked about vacation of the body when the spirit is enabled to transcend its bounds, and as a light escapes from a lantern to spread over space. And one of the Hindu, I believe it's called siddhis, there's about 8 of them, and one of them is included. The siddhis are the magical powers you get when you do yoga, and you're a yoga master. Is one of them being power of flying through the air, which is not what we think of as like levitation. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna gloat for a little bit here. Indulge me for a little bit, Camille, because I am going to come out and basically say I am fucking great at soul flight, because I have had a ton of practice, and I'll lay it out for you. So picture Douglas, aged 13 to 19. In this period of time, he was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I had high anxiety. Apparently, I was somewhere on the manic depressive side of things, and as every great parent in the 90s did, what do?
Drug him.
You drug him. Exactly. So I was on an interesting cocktail of Zoloft and Dexedrine. And Dexedrine itself is an amphetamine. It's literally amphetamine sulfate, which is speed. And I'm chemically sensitive to such things. And I had a terrible, terrible problem with being able to fall asleep at night. And it was one of those things where, thinking back on it now, it was absolute hell. I had my brain wanting to sleep, but my body was just unable to fall asleep. It became a huge problem. For about 4 months, this was my reality. It was awful, and school sucked at the time. I would dread just the idea of going to sleep or laying there and eventually having to just watch the clock slowly tick up to 6 o'clock when I had to wake up in the morning. So I don't know if it was a conscious decision on my part. I can't really remember, but I got so fed up with all of this problems with sleeping, I eventually just kind of let go. And I started to, in my attempt to get asleep, my body would be extremely relaxed, but my mind would be somewhat conscious. I would imagine myself going to other places. I would create characters in my mind, but the biggest thing I would do is I would put myself in other areas of the world that I would think about. And some of them were fake. I would love to go to, because I was obsessed with animals at the time, I would go to places like Madagascar, London, Mexico, ancient Mexico, space. Sometimes I could go onto the bridge of the Starship Enterprise and talk with the characters there. The fictional places, one of my favorite places to go in my mind was Fawlty Towers. I loved the show, and I would just hang out with the characters of Fawlty Towers. I did this for absolute years, and I'm unsure of whether or not I would have made it through life if I did not have this side of my existence. And it just stayed with me. It wasn't until I stopped taking those drugs that it kind of slipped into the background. But it helped me in my life to such an extent that I find that when I was doing research for this episode, it just became so apparent. I was like, well, why am I so good at this? Well, it's just because it's been something I've been doing for way more than half my life.
And on that, how do you find that you kind of rationalize your belief in soul flight or being able to project astral projection and project yourself to these different places versus a really strong imagination as a child, or having this information that you've seen through the TV shows or different places in the world that you've, maybe National Geographic or whatever you've been exposed to be able to apply that into a place and then to go there in your mind, to have something so visually strong and full because of what you've already received information-wise.
Right.
Versus like, like the skeptic in me goes, well, is this imagination or is this astral projection has kind of been deemed a pseudoscience in that it's not stuck in the boundaries of what science would say is
not possible. Right. If I think that these things are in some way real, and I can rationalize to myself that these things are in some form on the spectrum of being real, it's that how is it possible that I can have such vivid dreams or these astral travels or soul flights, and I can at any point step back and think about them or reread them, or if it's a dream, I'll record it on my phone. And the images are as vivid as when I had them the first time in my mind still. It's almost like a memory. And it's still, as it's in my mind, it still considers it as real and as vivid. That's the evidence that I have for myself. It's not strong evidence, and it's something that I can't really convince people on. But we'll get into it a little bit deeper.
Fascinating.
Yes. So modern astral travel basically comes from Theosophy. What that was a secret society that was quite widespread, and it was founded in 1875 by none other than Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was a Russian woman who was hard drinking, hard smoking, swore like a sailor. She could dish it out as much as she got. She was a real man's man, which was unfortunate because she was a woman in a time where women, it was a Victorian era, where women were not, they were seen as second-class citizens. It was, you had dogs, then women, then a huge space, and then you had man and then God, right? So Theosophy is a very convoluted, they have a very convoluted cosmology. It's enough for another whole future episode. Suffice to say that there are kingdoms, levels, and planes, and the way to navigate through them is through astral travel, meditation, and channeling. Blavatsky's books, in which she laid out her cosmology, are Secret Doctrine, but most importantly is a book called Isis Unveiled. They're interesting documents. So it was her thought that all moments, past, present, future, all objects and all places are stored in what is called the astral light. And that to be able to see these places, you have to travel in your astral body. And you don't just have one astral body, you've got several of them. Theosophy is kind of, in a way, responsible. It's arguable that they're kind of responsible for orientalization of bringing concepts like yoga and whatnot into their practices. They're kind of I don't know if they started it, but you have guys like Alan Bennett. They're kind of like how we think that all true wisdom comes from the East. It can't come from here. It can't come from Europe. It can't come from America. It's got to come from India or China, right? And how did she get all of her knowledge and all of her wisdom? She got them from what are called Mahatmas, or truly enlightened individuals. But what's important to recognize is that Theosophists, they considered the astral world completely separate from the objective world. Your everyday life, this objective reality, and then there's a totally separate reality. They never shall the two meet. Right. I'm not a huge fan of Theosophy and but their influence it's unbelievable. One of the group of 7 was a Theosophist.
Who? Really?
Yeah.
Who? Do you know who?
Yeah, Lauren Harris.
Lauren Harris was a Theosophist. Fascinating. You wonder because Lauren Harris is one of my favorite painters. So I've seen a lot of his work and have followed and how it evolved over the course of his career. Right. And I find it fascinating. His iconic iceberg paintings they made such an impact on me when I was younger. But you really do feel this like otherworldly almost view to these paintings, and it's in the energy that's kind of surrounding these icebergs. That's in there in the paint and how it's portrayed. Right. And his study and kind of fascination with those. Right. You can kind of feel
something else was coming through.
Exactly.
He saw things a bit differently.
Yeah. Which a lot of painters and artists do, but it's pretty clear. That's really neat that he was a Theosophist. Yeah. Yeah, and he the rest of the group of 7 were like, he needs to shut up about this kind of stuff. But he would constantly tell them about these ideas, and it influenced them in an interesting way. There's a great book called Vanguard of a New Age about Theosophy, and it's influenced in Canada, but especially with the group of 7. It's really cool stuff. So I'm glad you actually know about Lauren Harris. Everybody should know about Lauren Harris.
I agree. Everybody around the world. This is not just exclusively a Canadian podcast. No. Everybody should know about the group of 7.
Although they are famous Canadian painters.
Theosophy, their impact, esoteric orders as a result of Theosophy, all of them at the time they all included elements of what the Theosophists put out. One of those orders is called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And we're still kind of living in their shadows. Most of what constitutes Western magic kind of came from these guys. They had such members as William Butler Yeats, the great poet, Aleister Crowley, Dion Fortune, Arthur Machen. I believe Conan Doyle was a member. I know I'm a little bit like Oprah here, but just with passing out, you get an episode, and you get an episode, and you get an episode, but the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn will get their own episode. I can't go too deeply in here. But they kind of came up in after Theosophy. They have a pretty shaky relationship with each other, Golden Dawn and the Theosophists. So their cosmology was basically a misinterpretation of Jewish mysticism, especially Kabbalah and Rosicrucian ideals, or what they felt Rosicrucian ideals were. They loved the astral travel bit from the Theosophists. And they use their exercise, but instead of visiting these realms, they replaced it with using the Kabbalistic tree of life and the Sephiroth and the paths on the tree of life, where you would travel to. They would use the Chinese I Ching, hexagrams, the tatwas, which they took wholesale from the Theosophists. Blavatsky was big on the Tattvas. And most especially, they used the tarot, which was a big thing at the time. Again, they would use astral travel to travel along the paths and try to use the cards themselves as a doorway to get into the astral world.
Oh.
So astral travel and projection was a huge part of their process and the progress of their initiates and their adepts. I think that the Golden Dawn is given way more credit than they deserve. I call them the moldy goldies, but I think that some of they did some good things though.
Why the moldy goldies? Because do you feel like they're a bit phony in that it sounds like they've kind of picked some different parts of all sorts of different belief structures that are out there and kind of created their own thing with it, with that? Or
I just think because it's a somewhat intricate system that's so broad that people absolutely love it. There's a lot of cool imagery and the rituals that they went through when their rituals were finally published. It's theatrical and it's attractive. I get that, but it was more than 120 years ago, and they were using the information that was available to them at the time of what they thought that Jewish mysticism, especially Kabbalah, was. I think we just have to move on. I think magic itself just has to kind of move on from them. It works well. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and their cosmology works well as a museum exhibit. Let's just have a look and let's just keep moving on. Let's not try and break the glass and get in there. So it's not so much what the Golden Dawn or the Moldy Goldies. I like what kind of comes after they split out, because we just had a lot of these huge personalities. Yeats didn't get along with Crowley. Dion Fortune didn't get along with a lot of people. That it split apart. It just kind of blew apart. But it's what the followers did afterward. That's kind of where it's really important. And I love what some of them kind of came up with, the idea of an astral temple.
An astral temple.
An astral temple that you have, that you can go to. That's yours. Yeah.
It's yours. That's what I was going to say. This is my astral temple, and nobody else is permitted.
No. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like if you think of Happy Gilmore, his happy place. Go to your happy place.
It's his astral temple.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think that's a really important thing. And if you don't want to think that it's your astral temple, I think people should have a space they can go to internally. That's yours. That's entirely of your creation, and with elements of things that you like from the real world. Pull it in and create your own space.
A lot of this makes me think about childhood and imagination and the power of the imagination, and how really we're so open then before we've kind of gone through the pressing of society and the molds that we're crafted into. Yeah. We're pretty open to that. Right. Yeah. And you don't really think twice about it.
No. The Moldy Goldies, they muddied the water a lot. They trying to figure out through their cosmology what the astral body or the mind or even what the imagination is to the Golden Dawners. They try to talk about it, and it's not clear, and in some respects it's just downright frustrating. And we've been in this kind of state of frustration with astral bodies and the astral temple, soul flight, since then. So it begs the question, if it starts with the Theosophists, is astral travel, is it modern? Is it a modern phenomenon? And I do not think so, just as you brought up. Like spells, we've probably always been doing this kind of thing. We've always had the use of using our mind to go to places. I think we've always been doing this. This is entirely speculation on my part, and I could probably get a huge slap on the wrist for this, but I think that ancient man, with death being so close always, at all points, people going into fevers, that there were numerous near-death experiences, and people were surrounded by death. It was omnipresent. It was there at all times, and that the people that returned from the brink that had these experiences and of these places that they went to, they seemed like they almost had something more than what the rest of the people that they were with, that they had a little something special, a little something extra. And so why wouldn't we want to try and visit these places without having to actually kill ourselves?
Right.
So Again, that's entirely speculation, but it's to me it seems somewhat true that they wanted this access to the other world. With these kind of things, you need the most powerful tool in modern magic right now is context and comparison. And I'm going to keep throughout not just this episode, but through all future episodes, I'm going to keep bragging on this. It's so important. Context, because with every new thing that we learn about the past, it changes our present. It's the more that we learn about what happened before that actually changes what's happening now and how we can proceed into the future. Like how the Golden Dawn thought that what they had at the time, that was like those were the cool ideas. Those were the interesting ideas. That's what they used because that's all they had. But now that the time has progressed, we're just like, no, they unfortunately were mistaken about a lot of things. And they were downright wrong about a lot of things. Comparison, because we need to realize that like Carl Jung, the dividing walls of culture and belief and religion, they're actually quite transparent. We need to be able to compare that the experiences that these cultures have with experiences of other cultures. So it's context and comparison are I think they should be paramount in the toolkit of everybody interested in this kind of thing. The journey of so-called more primitive cultures now is almost the same thing that we, up until about 500 years, that we used to do. We were all about the interiority and what goes on within your inner life. So now we're going to get into stars of the astral. That's a little bit of a joke. It's because astral means star.
Yeah.
It's not very funny. So let's start with Emanuel Swedenborg. That's right. He's known as the Scandinavian Da Vinci. He was an incredibly intelligent man, extremely interesting character. But as far as astral projection is concerned, he was the hipster of the astral projection. He was doing it before it was cool.
Oh.
Again, he was an extremely intelligent man. He was a great civic scientist in Sweden. He spent a lot of time in London as well. He had a mystical experience in 1744. He said that God would show him the true spiritual nature of the world. Up until this time, he was very fascinated with consciousness itself. He would record his dreams. He'd write them down. So in a way, he was kind of doing what Carl Jung did with the Red Book. He was fascinated with breath control, concentration skills, other forms of inner exploration. And after this mystical experience, he said that he could visit the world of spirits. He could go into heaven and hell and see the angels and the spirits and the things there. He would travel to different planets and visit with the beings / spirits there as well. Very, very interesting stuff. If this is your jam, you have to go before the Theosophists and look at Emanuel Swedenborg, because I think he was definitely seeing the real shit. And it's quite eloquent stuff. The stuff that he talks about. Angels are just kind of like us. They're just us, but they get their righteousness from God directly. Hell is just a place where your dreams are unfulfilled. It's not a place of death and torture. It's just a place where you are, that you don't live up to your full potential. And we have a choice as to where we go, to heaven or hell. The spirits in these places were telling him that when a tree falls, that's where it lies. So if you're a person that lives his life terribly, you already know that you're going to hell. If you're a person that tries to be a good person, then that's obviously you go to heaven, and nothing's stopping you from going to that place. I love Emanuel Swedenborg. Again, he gets his own episode. But he's an absolute,
he already sounds super fascinating to me.
Really cool guy, huge influence at his time. We have another figure. Her name is Teresa of Avila. She was a noblewoman in Spain who became a nun, who was eventually made a saint. And she lived in Avila in Castile, Spain. It was her contention through deep meditation via prayer. She built a world called the Interior Castle. She saw the soul as a diamond in the shape of a castle with 7 mansions there. Avila is a walled city, and of course the state in Spain where she lived is Castile, which means castle. And so there's speculation that she got her ideas from just being around barriers and walls and whatnot. The Interior Castle is a wonderful, wonderful read. More than anything, it showed to Catholics that got behind it the idea of an interiority of us that is rich. Ultimately, it's important, and as important to life as your faith is, that the exploration is essential in your, while you're here in this transitory state before you go to heaven, that you spend time in the Interior Castle. So yeah, no, she's absolutely lovely. And our last star of the astral is a gentleman by the name of Ingo Swann. He was a psychic, co-creator of the Stargate project, which is interesting if you look it up. He was so good at being a psychic, he once said that I don't get tested. I only work with people that assume that this is a real thing. He's an amazing figure. On April 27th, 1973, he and a couple of colleagues, he said that he wanted to remote view the planet Jupiter. We didn't know a ton about Jupiter at the time. And this was before the Voyager probe passed by Jupiter in 79, so we didn't know a lot about Jupiter. And it took about 3.5 minutes for him to travel there. It took him 30 minutes to just calm himself down. He asked for complete silence, calm himself down. And yeah, he went to take a look at the planet Jupiter. He saw things there. He said that it had a gaseous atmosphere, that the terrain almost moved like gas, but it was almost like a liquid. He said that there were crystals in the atmosphere, and he even said that there was a ring around Jupiter, which at the time we did not know that Jupiter had a ring. The people that he was with was, well, you didn't visit Jupiter, you went to Saturn. He's like, no, I was in Jupiter. What's interesting about this is that a lot of what he said was actually true when we finally found out this information. The ring being one, we found that there are ice crystals in the atmosphere towards the north of Jupiter. One thing he missed was the moons. I believe at this point we've found 63 moons around Jupiter, but in his defense, he said that he wanted to look at Jupiter itself. So this brings the question up about remote viewing. Is any of this real? Mm-hmm. So the first question you have to ask yourself, and this seems like an easy cop-out, but what exactly is real? What is it the physical? Is that what real is? And even on that note, what is the physical? It's my contention that these things exist on a spectrum of varying intensity. So on the low end of the spectrum, you have something like daydreaming. And a little bit further up, you would have something, say, like Jung's active imagination. Go a little bit higher, we get astral projection. Further, on the far end, at the very top, you have out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. What happened to us is due to René Descartes and his followers especially, is that we have this split, and we're still suffering from this kind of trauma, basically, that mind and matter are completely separate things. That they never shall the two meet, right? So what has to be asked is, what is this other world that these people are visiting through remote viewing or through soul flight, astral projection? You know, the traveling to the aethers is, to me, it is the subjective side of reality. And it could also be, like Swedenborg, it's the world of spirits. To most people, this would just sound like I'm just sitting down and I'm just using my imagination. Again, the question is what is the imagination even, right? What is the symbolic communication that we get from inside our brains, and where do we get it from? And this is kind of where I side with the idealists, people that think that the mind is the thing. It's all in the mind. The mind is the fundamental aspect of our reality. There's a gentleman by the name of Bernardo Kastrup. He points out, through mechanisms yet unknown to science, our minds have direct access to a largely untapped repository. So that sounds a little bit like Blavatsky. About reality. Reality itself may well be an expression of function of consciousness. Consciousness as imagination. Hell, it might even be reality. Now, this doesn't mean that nothing is real or that dreams are the same thing as physical reality. It's a spectrum, and dreams can materialize and matter can behave in a dreamlike way. Dreams and material reality may well be the same stuff, which is more fundamental than either. So, this way of looking at things, again, spectrum, we're absolutely terrible when we think about the brain and what is real, what is not, what is matter, what is mind, where it all comes from. What if it is just the figured side of reality? So we don't even understand what thoughts are. We have our devices, and we hook our brains up to these devices, and they say that we're observing brain states, but brain states can be described in physical terms. And if thoughts are identical to brain states, then why can't we describe thoughts in physical terms? See, unlike brain states, thoughts have no position, they have no mass, they have no charge, and so forth. Subjective and objective states of reality are still real. It's just that the manifestation and expression of them differs, right? So I treat the imaginal or subjective reality as a very important part of our lives, as Teresa of Avila did as well. And here's something where I think a lot of problems arise in this modern world, because we do a lot of thinking without even understanding what thinking is. But meaning comes from engagement with the world, or with the worlds that we create, both physical and imaginal. It comes from an engagement with it, not from an abstract contemplation of it. And this is the main reason that I'm a magician. It's with the engagement of these things. Carl Jung, last episode, he brought up the fact that everything in the unconscious seeks outward manifestation. So if this is true, I think we should meet it halfway. What happens when I bring my subjective world into the objective one? Like, is that dangerous? I had an ex-girlfriend who thought that when I would talk about dreams, talk about them in a way that was as real as I would if I'd just gone to the convenience store, and she thought that I was extremely delusional. She called me childish, all this kind of thing. But I see it as closing the loop. I'm not delusional. I'm not crazy. What I am doing is, even from a young age, I understood is that I'm adding to my sanity. In fact, this is making me less of a crazy person. I feel that moments when I actually start to go crazy is when I neglect this so-called imaginal world, is when I'm staying here in the so-called objective reality, is when I start to have problems. When I neglect the dreams, when I neglect the astral travel, that's when things really start to bog me down, because I live an extremely rich, imaginal, astral, etheric, ephemeral life. And so I don't see it as dangerous at all, and I don't think that if people actually engage with them, that they'd find, maybe at the beginning they'd find it a little bit stupid. If you fold it in like you're creating a dough for bread, if you add the little ingredient of the unconscious, you add a little bit of that, you just kind of fold it in there. I think it's the secret ingredient, if you will.
I think that we're trained to suppress stuff and to control what we're thinking, and certainly how we behave and what we accept and how we want people to see us. That's such a huge thing, this presentation. And so some of what you're saying seems to be trying to like embrace and also like kind of open the channel up for the even subconscious within us to come out, so that we can actually live as one thing, rather than this divided like presentation of ourself versus what's actually inside.
The bullshit that I see from the Cartesian mind matter being entirely separate, I'm putting them together. It's a metaphysics that I find to be extremely important, that I think a lot of people are neglecting in their lives.
We're taught to keep these things separate, but if we were just to embrace them, you'd actually be living a more fulfilled, understood life. Like, and so many people are angry and confused and like don't understand what's going on. And there's this huge trend and fad of yoga and like meditation and being in tune with yourself and looking inward. And that's all coming out in our century of looking at being so consumed by technology.
Right.
We're seeing that, I think, come out in people being willing and wanting to kind of explore this and close this loop.
Right. The meditation only goes so far, I think, and it's a great talent, and I've been meditating for basically since I was like 26 on a regular basis. Meditation's good, and it gets rid of a lot of stuff, and it kind of grounds you, and it kind of, I would hate to use the word selfish, but it kind of just keeps you here. Well, what if in that state while you're here, you go somewhere else, right? What if you allow for some of the things that your unconscious is bringing up anyways, because it's going to.
It's going to come up. You can't just keep it. The more you suppress something, the more it's going to come up.
Go with it. Ride that pony, right? So that's kind of one of the major tenets that I think would be ultimately beneficial for people to live a more magical life. It's not dangerous in any way, shape, or form.
Aren't there, don't some people, and when I was looking into some of this idea came up that astral travel related to lucid dreaming and people being able to lucid dream, but then also go to another space, plane, time, whatever area.
Right.
And through dream, like state, be able to be there and watch other dreamers that are not aware of them interacting within their dream or their space.
Right.
So
it's not silly.
It's so layered.
Yeah. It is, isn't it?
It's quite complex.
It's like a dream.
It's like dreams. Yeah. But that idea came up.
Yeah.
Which is.
Yeah, I don't. When I'm doing things, I don't live in an empty dream world. I don't live in an empty astral plane. There's figures there. What are they? I don't know. Are they spirits?
Some people have described them as other dreamers.
Are they other dreamers?
That are also there, and whether they're aware of you or not.
Oh,
it's a different thing.
I like that.
Well, yeah, and then it makes you ask the question of like a collective consciousness or like area, which also like the Akashic records.
Akashic records, yeah.
Right? This came up, which I thought was fascinating.
That's a very big theosophy.
Is that its own episode, Oprah?
Yeah.
Dopra?
Yeah, the Akashic records, I would probably have to fold that in with Rudolf Steiner and the episode on Theosophy. It's interesting stuff.
It's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to hear more about that too. Because the idea that there is this place that exists that is a record of everything that's happened in the past, the intentions of things that people intend to happen, and everything that's happened in the future. All existence in this one place that you can actually travel to.
When I mentioned the Theosophist, that was the place. It's the shore that all moments, all places, all of this exist, and that is this storage, this Akashic record. That's where you can go when you astral travel. Here's a thing where I think a lot of people might consider that there's a small danger, is that when I experience something in these states, that when I dream that somebody's an asshole to me in my dream, that I'm going to take that, and then when I next see that person, that's somehow going to color that my reality. But
what do you mean with that? Oh, you mean that it doesn't color your reality, or it does?
No, I don't think that. Well, maybe their astral body was an ass to me, but not their real body, right?
Right.
So
I don't know. I wake up from dreams, and often, like if I've dreamt about whoever, I do hold a very real feeling in my body.
You got a bit of a grudge.
Not a grudge. I try to not hold it against people because it was a dream, just a dream.
It was just a dream.
But there is something that, like, why is my subconscious dealing with this right now in my dream? There's got to be a reason underneath it all, and it's something I'm probably suppressing instead of letting come out. Right? Yeah.
But the objective and the subjective states of the physical, they're not exactly the same. It was your state that changed, and perhaps the other did not.
Yeah.
Right. that you have to be careful, because that's kind of where insanity lies. If you're bringing all of these things, which, I mean, they're real, not real,
right,
into the real world, supposed real world, then that's where you can be. That's where a little bit of danger.
Yeah, with any relationship, it's also I think it comes up sometimes in like your way, if you making assumptions and the stories that you create. Some therapists would say like their fantasies or whatever that you create around something without knowing the facts.
Yeah.
And puts you in a very specific state, negative state, I'm going to say.
Yeah. As far as other dangers of doing this, there really aren't any. Bringing in the astral world, the soul, the world of the soul, the world of the spirits, trying to find examples of besides just actually doing it for dumb reasons and thinking that it's all real. That's kind of that. I found an interesting story. His name was W.B. Seabrook, Willie Seabrook. I love the first line in his Wikipedia page brought this up. American occultist, explorer, traveler, cannibal, and journalist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's
a lot of things.
Cannibal. Yeah. Cannibal. Yeah, apparently when he was in
unpopular
Africa.
right now.
Yeah. But he writes of a story of a person named Natasha Filipovna. She was having trouble with looking into a crystal ball. So they said, well, let's astral travel. And in this case, we're going to use the one of the I Ching hexagrams. So they found one. The hexagram, I forget what number it was, but it was the hexagram Ko. So she starts to they talk her through how to relax her body to get into the altered state of consciousness. And for about 30 minutes, she's fine. And then eventually says, like, I see something. And there's a door and it's opening. I'm going through the I Ching hexagram. And she's there for a little bit. And then next thing you know, she starts breathing oddly. She starts like panting like an animal. And she starts like making very odd noises. And one of the people that was with Willie Seabrook, he's basically, I think we should try and like wake her up. So he leans over to try to wake her up, and she like leaps at him just like an animal, just starts trying to like gouge his eyes out and go for his throat. And they eventually get some blankets and wrap her in the blankets and get her down, and eventually put some, I believe it was ammonia, under her nose, and she comes out of it totally being normal. They unwrap her, she gets up, she goes to the bathroom with her makeup, comes back after having fixed her makeup, pops a cigarette in, lights it up, sits down on the chair, and just basically says, what time is it? Records of this kind of thing. I think that I think this is fictional. I don't think this is real. I don't know very many instances where people have done this. But if it is true, what's interesting is that the hexagram Ko it means molting or transformation. There's the images of a tiger or a panther in there, and strangely enough, wrapped in the hide of a yellow cow. This is the most extreme case. If it is true, I don't put a lot of validity into this. But the question is asked, like, do I come back changed after I do an astral travel? And that's hard to say, and I can't say with any kind of certainty. I know that normally when I do it, I come back feeling better. Do I think that it has behavioral changes? I don't think so. I've safeguarded myself through doing this for so long that I would be able to, hopefully, be able to detect if some kind of personality or mental change has occurred. But it's nothing that I have seen so far.
I wonder if you thought about it, if that was like your intention with it. If there was some kind of behavioral aspect that you wanted to change, if it could help influence.
I'd use other magical techniques to do that. I wouldn't use this. It would be like trying to microwave something with your TV. So how do you astral travel is the question. What do you do? How do you get there? Because everybody wants to do this now. Imagine you can go to Venice right now if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
How do you do that? So I'm going to just basically come up with...
San Junipero.
Yeah, San Junipero. There you go.
Black Mirror.
Nice. I would say that most books about astral travel they're woefully awful. They're terrible. They're terrible at describing what happens. They're terrible at describing how to get to the astral planes or soul flight or whatnot. And this might come as a bit of a letdown. Unfortunately, with soul flight and especially with soul flight, you kind of have to figure out what works best for you.
So subjective.
Yeah. It's what I will say is that meditation helps if you are able to reach a state of hypnagogia, which is kind of the state before you fall asleep, that kind of like twilight state. If you're able to get there, that also helps it well. And most of my best soul flights have been using hypnagogia. I can tell you what I do. I can't give an overall, everybody can do this and they will be able to achieve soul flight, but I'm normally lying down. I get very relaxed. Sometimes I will meditate, or sometimes I will put on the hypnagogic state. There's an app called Insight Timer. It's quite helpful. If you want to set aside about an hour to an hour and a half, you'll be able to. It'll have some music. You'll kind of drift in, but every once in a while, it'll kind of keep you so you're not. You haven't gone to sleep. Mm-hmm. It'll kind of kick you up so you're able to maintain the hypnagogic state. Mm-hmm. I basically get myself into an altered state of consciousness. And how do you know? The best description I was trying to come up with for this episode is you just know. But the feeling for me is it's if you can describe the feeling of taking like a yoga mat or like a gym mat and holding it above your head, just a little bit above ground, and letting it go, kind of how the one part touches and the rest just kind of follows until it hits the ground, that kind of whoomp. Mm-hmm. That's slow moving. That's kind of how it feels to me. I couldn't think of a better example than that. Mm. But once I'm there, I try to move my muscles in this, I guess, astral body. So I start with my fingers, and the feeling is almost exactly the same. And then I go to the toes. The feeling is exactly the same. And then I will, with my astral body, I will lift my limbs, and that's a really important part. If you can, you're not there if you don't feel like you are actually literally lifting your arms out. And then I'll get out of my regular body, and first thing I do is I look back at myself and where I'm lying. That's how I get there. For people, if once they've got there, there's a couple of things I can suggest. Don't immediately go to the Eiffel Tower. Don't immediately go to the Amazon jungle. Don't go to, I don't know, Winterfell or whatever the fuck, right? First of all, start small. Take your time with this. So after you've looked at yourself, and you've got that pretty good, start with the room you're in. If you can look around the room that you're in, and here's another question is people have asked me before, is it like a first-person point of view where it's like you are now, where I'm seeing through your eyes, or is it a third person? Am I like a character, like a person on a canvas? Mm-hmm. And it's weird because in certain situations, it's one or the other. Sometimes they can switch back and forth, but in most cases, it's first person. So get out of your body, start with your room. Once you have that pretty much down pat, and it'll feel like your room. It's tough to explain. You're there, but you can see yourself. Next thing you know, open the door to your room, go into your living room, go to places that are familiar to you. And you're not looking for accuracy here. You're not looking for everything to be the same. If things appear differently in this realm, in this subjective reality, then go with it. It might be how it wants to appear. Okay? Then eventually spend some time there. These are the starting steps. Go to the back door a little bit. Just each night, go a little bit further. Open the back door, have a look outside. Again, some things are going to be different. Some things might be better. Some things might be actually kind of like vacant, like, well, that's not where that's supposed to be, or what is that even doing there? Eventually push yourself further each and every time you do it, but don't go absolutely crazy. Then you're allowed to go to the places that you want to go. If you feel that you're able to go to the stars, if you can confidently ask yourself that you can visit Alpha Centauri and it not being too difficult, then I would say go for it. But start with things that are familiar, and then eventually add things that are not. Surprise yourself, and eventually maybe you might want to do the whole moldy goldie thing of using tarot cards. Some of the stuff that they wrote, like the scrying of the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, I didn't find it very useful. My results were kind of like, other people have gotten a ton out of it. I found the tarot stuff to actually be very, very advantageous. That was really interesting to me. Again, I think that everybody should have an astral temple. Even if this other stuff sounds, if this stuff sounds like garbage to you, you should be able to, from wherever you are, if you're sitting or if you're lying down, is to be able to get out of your body and go to a place that inspires you, or gives you comfort, or relaxes you. I think that that's just something that everybody should have. A happy place. You should have a happy place, if not a happy place, a place for slowing things down. Another thing that I think would be extremely helpful, once you've kind of, don't go to these places expecting it to immediately happen, but once you've got a little proficiency in it, are sensory deprivation tanks or flotation tanks.
Oh, yeah.
They are the best soul flight I've ever done has been in flotation tanks. It's really quite stunning. It's like going from 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions. It's just, it's fantastic. Gets a bit expensive.
Do you feel like there are certain places in our world that are that let us access the astral plane more simply? Like, I think of anywhere that I would feel more relaxed, comfortable, in tune, often like with nature, cottages with water, like the coasts of Canada.
Yes. Correct. If the spirits of a place are truly speaking to you, I know that sounds a little new agey and wishy-washy, but we kind of have this feeling. I don't know what it is, but if there's a place where you're just like, I feel something here.
Yeah.
Oh yes, go for it. Some of the best astral, I've done it in the middle of an afternoon, lying on the disgusting, dirty ground in a forest, and the results you get quite good. Yep, no, absolutely.
Yeah, well, there's no, like, in my mind, there's no question about energy of certain places and how they feel and how I relate to them, you know?
Lean into it.
There's a lot there.
Lean into it. You'll be quite surprised, I think. Everybody will be quite surprised.
Also, 2 questions.
Yeah.
One, how do you see, I mean, you talked about perspective of your astral body when you're in it. You talked about perspective, but I'm wondering how you kind of see your astral body. Yeah, if you were to paint it or to describe it.
I'm normally kind of exactly like I am here. I'm usually wearing either a completely white linen clothes or completely black linen clothes. And I don't know why. I'm pretty much how I appear in a mirror in my astral body. It might just be that I'm somewhat comfortable with who I am.
Yeah, your mind's eye mirror.
Yeah.
The second part of it is that how you return to your physical body with your astral body.
Very, very good question. So it's not a matter of retracing your steps. Best that I can do is that once I'm done with either my astral temple, or once I'm done, I basically just almost like teleport back. Which Theosophists would be like, that's like ridiculous. They had the idea of a silver cord that is attached to you, to your body, and it's just kind of like pulling the silver cord to get back. I've never need to do that. I can basically just, I try to start. I don't go immediately back to the bedroom. Sometimes I try to like get to my back door. So where to now?
Oh.
I'm not going to suggest any books. There's one book called Soul Flight by a fellow Canadian, Donald Tyson. He's from Nova Scotia. It's good. The first half of the book is the history kind of astral travel and soul flight, and the last half is kind of practical. The first half of the book is actually quite good. It's worth a read if people are interested in this. But read some accounts of how other cultures have kind of achieved this. Read accounts of how indigenous cultures, indigenous Australian culture, indigenous North American cultures, and again, but keep in the context and comparison. Like always keep that there. Unfortunately, again, you're on your own with how to do it. But this is a good thing. This is you starting something that is important, and the experimentation and the dalliance with this objective spectrum. So this is good. And for some magicians, this visiting other planes, the ethers, the realms, they kind of think that this is where all magic is performed. If that's your thing, I go for it. But there's this whole other side to magic that gets ignored, like the intrusion of the spirit world in your everyday waking life. I'd say that if if your entire magical paradigm revolves around the astral body, the astral plane, I'd say try to take a little bit out. It's important, but it's not the whole thing. And lastly is, and I got to do this again, just everybody give it a shot. If this stuff is fascinating to you, just do it and lean into it, and don't be immediately critical of it. Just keep trying. Don't give up so easily, and you will see definite effects of it that will seem like magic. And I will basically end my portion of this by saying that experience is so essential to soul flight and astral travel and astral projection. I'll end with Harold Hofting's a quote from his book Human Reflection. It's that we have no knowledge going beyond experience, but at no stage are we entitled to look upon the experience as complete. Thus, knowledge, even at its highest, provides us with nothing more than a segment of the existing world. Every reality we may find is itself again part of a wider reality. So that's it. That's Soul Flight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah. So that's the episode, everybody. And I hope they learned a little bit here on this one. And I hope they actually do this. This doesn't cost money. This is a pretty free form of magic. And I think it's free, and as far as results, this is one of the better ones. And yeah, give it a try. Go for a little soul flight. Take it easy. So if anybody's interested, they can head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you'll find links to my Twitter, my Facebook, my Instagram page. Also on there you'll find links to iTunes, Google Play. You'll find Stitcher. You'll find TuneIn. You'll find YouTube. You'll find all of those wonderful places in which you can listen to your favorite podcasts. Also on my website, you'll find some show notes. The show notes for this one, they're going to be a little lacking, again, because the practical side of this is something you're going to have to figure out for yourself, but I'll find a couple of interesting tidbits for you. And we're going to end the show with the post-show quid pro quo. Camille, are you ready?
I'm not sure. All right.
Okay.
I'm not prepared for this, but I guess I couldn't be.
No. You are an actor.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that an actor who has a better sense of imagination would make a better actor? A person who is more in tune with the subjective side of reality would make a better actor. What are your thoughts on this?
I look at acting a little bit. I think the closest to magic you get in acting is in very in-depth training and ease. Like when you're in coachings and when you're working on your craft, it's called a craft. I mean, actors work with time and space. You're kind of jumping through time. You're putting yourself in a different space. You're imagining everything. So absolutely, I think the more detail and the more exploration that you can do in any situation that you're trying to put yourself into, the better result you're going to get. So yes.
Camille, thank you so much for being on What Magic Is This?
Thanks, Doug.
We'll talk again soon, yeah?
Yep.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk at you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.